Hi, I'm Jacquie Gouveia. Welcome. In this painting video, I'm going to demonstrate how I created this painting from start to finish. We're going to keep the composition really simple, and we're going to focus on the color yellow, which is a great, fun, bright, energetic color to work with. I hope you learn lots of new stuff. Thanks so much. So before we get started, I just want to talk about the tools that I like to use when I paint. Obviously, I have my easel. I've had this easel for several years, and it's nice and sturdy. But when you get started, you can use anything. This happens to be a little bit more expensive easel, but you can buy things that are just tabletop if you're getting started. You can buy things right at Michael's that aren't that expensive. My canvas. I tend to like a canvas that has a lot of texture on it. It's a heavier weight cotton canvas, and it's wrapped, it's gallery wrapped. It's about 1.5 inches thick because I paint the sides. That way people don't have to frame it if they don't want to. Because I use acrylics, I always have a spray bottle on hand. The room that I'm in now tends to be dry, so my paints dry quickly. And you have to kind of keep your environment in mind. If you're painting on a rather muggy day, your paints are it's gonna take longer for them to dry because they're gonna be a little bit soupier. So when if I'm painting in a drier environment, this spray bottle comes in handy because I can keep my paints wet and I can control the consistency of them. I also use two types of gessos when I paint. I use a clear gesso, which is clear. It doesn't really affect the color at all, but it helps me to kind of get some fluidity with the paint. And the clear gesso also has a small, tiny grittiness to it. Again, it gives it a texture that I like to work with. The other gesso that I work with is white gesso. I tend to use gesso as my white. I do use a titanium white, but especially when I'm working on big paintings, I use gesso as my white because it gives me that ability to really mix up big spots of paint. So that way when I'm working on a large canvas, I can move the paint around. So I like to use gesso as my white. You know, it's acrylic base, it mixes well with my acrylic paints. So my paints themselves, my favorite brand is M. Graham. M. Graham makes both acrylic and oils. It's more of probably a pricier acrylic paint, but because I sell my paintings, I like to have quality products. And M. Graham, their colors are gorgeous. They're really vibrant, they're really rich, and they're great to work with. My palette, my palette is basically, I think it used to be in a picture frame at one point. It's just a piece of plexiglass. And I can clean it really easy. I spray it down, I can wash it off. I keep my palette nice and clean. And when you see how I mix paintings, I only mix one color at a time. I don't have a bunch of different colors. So I mix the color that I'm going to work with, I use it, and I clean my palette off. So I like to keep my palette nice and clean because it helps me keep my colors nice and fresh. I also use palette knives. So I use the palette knives to both mix paint and also apply paint on my canvas. And I'm going to show you that in the video later, how I actually apply some paint on my canvas with a palette knife. And then last but not least, my brushes. So I buy really cheap brushes. I know when you can go out and you can spend a ton of money on brushes. I used to do that, and it just didn't make sense for me anymore with the way I paint. So I buy these brushes at like a Lowe's or a Michael's. They're super cheap. They're like maybe $1. And I really work my brushes hard. As you can see, this little stubby brush used to look something like this. But I like using both of these brushes because this brush is really soft. It gives me one sort of technique that I like to use, the way I apply the paint. And this brush that's really gotten worn down and stubby helps me really kind of scrub in areas if I want to lighten things up, if I want to kind of pull some of the paint off. You know, I get to use these kinds of brushes. This will wear down to a point where I really can't use it anymore, so I throw it out. But again, I use really, really cheap brushes. So let's talk about the colors that we're going to use in this painting. First color, cadmium yellow deep. So this is a yellow. This painting, as I mentioned, is going to focus on the color yellow. So this is cadmium yellow deep. It's a richer, earthier, warmer yellow. We're also going to use cadmium yellow. So this is more of a canary yellow. This is a little bit more similar probably to the yellow in Crayola crayon box. So that's another yellow. We're also going to use just a touch of yellow ochre. And we're going to mix that with the cadmium yellow deep. And we're just going to use a little bit just to kind of tone down the yellow a little bit. But that's our third yellow we're going to use. We're also going to be using cobalt blue. Cobalt blue is a nice airy kind of blue. It's not as rich as an ultramarine, but it's a really beautiful blue to work with. We're going to also be using cadmium orange. We're actually going to use this to mix with the cobalt blue for the bottom half of the painting. Cadmium orange, I use this a lot. It's a great color to work with. And last but not least, but we are going to use some Payne's Gray. So this is going to kind of sit right on top at the horizon line. We're going to kind of use it right out of the tube. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to put some sort of underpainting on the canvas. So we just want to put some color on here. And so for my underpainting, I'm going to mix up some white, cobalt blue, and some cadmium orange. So we're going to kind of have like a bluish gray underpainting. So we can just mix that up with some white gesso. Some of the cobalt blue. And just a little bit of the cadmium orange. This is going to kind of gray down the blue. Because if you know anything about the color chart or color theories, blue and orange are complementary colors. So when you mix them together, they make a really pretty gray. The orange warms up that blue and creates a nice warm gray. That's a little too light for my liking, so I'm going to add a little bit more blue and just a little bit more orange. Mix that up. And I think I'm actually going to mix just a tiny bit more orange in there because I do want it to go on the gray side. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to add a little bit of clear gesso. Nice. Okay. And I'm actually going to squirt this a little bit because I want this underpainting to be a little bit on the wet side. Okay. So I'm just going to start spreading this paint onto the canvas. And for the bottom half, I'm going to just kind of lay it in side to side. For this painting, our horizon line is going to be basically dead center. So I do want some of the underpainting to be on the top part, but I only want the underpainting to be kind of on the edges a little bit. So I'm going to purposefully not put the underpainting throughout the whole top, because I want, when we lay on the yellow, I want some areas to be just complete direct yellow with no underpainting on that. And we'll see why. I like the effect that it has, and it gives that yellow the ability to be kind of the star, you know, and it's a true solid yellow. So I'm just going to add some more paint down below. I'm going to kind of leave the top alone. And I'm actually going to darken up this just a little bit. So I'm adding a little bit more cobalt blue and a little bit more of the cadmium orange. And again, I'm just going to kind of pull it in on the bottom here, just real light. I'm going to add a touch of the lighter, just going across. And again, as usual, I'm not covering the entire canvas. I'm letting some of the white show through. And I'm letting kind of the values just kind of play out. So we got some lighter values, some darker values. Up at the top, again, I'm just kind of covering up just around the edges. You know, on this side, I did a bigger underpainting spot, but on the other side, I'm leaving a whole area up top where it's completely just blank canvas, all right? And again, when we put the yellow on, I want that canvas to show through, and I want it to be just pure yellow when we get to that point. All right, so here we got our underpainting, so we can move on to the next piece. All right, so the next thing that we're going to work on is we're going to talk about the horizon line. So for this composition, I'm basically putting the horizon line right around in the middle here. And one of the things that I'm going to do that is different from my other videos, but something I do in some of my other paintings, is I'm going to use a piece of graphite. So this graphite, which is like charcoal pencil, but it's harder than charcoal, this gives me some really nice darks. So basically, I just use it as a pencil, and I'm going to just kind of draw it in some areas. I'll leave like a space, draw it in over here, just get some lines in there. And what I then do is I just take some clear gesso and a brush that has been worn down a little bit but still has some softness to it. I just dip that in the clear gesso and I just brush right over that graphite. And the nice thing is you get these really great grays and also this variation in values. So if I add some more gesso and go over an area, I can, now that it's wetter, I can drag it out. I can make bigger spots. Some areas are going to be darker than others, which is exactly what I want. Just be really loose with it. I'm just trying to create some sort of tree line basically on that horizon. And we're gonna let this dry, but as we move along, we're going to keep building up this area. So this is going to be like our first layer of this graphite. So I just need a little bit more gesso. And I'm going to take care of the other side. So I'm just going to drag that gesso right over it. Taking it back and forth, taking it up and down. Some areas I'm going to drag down further than others. And it's fine. I'm taking it right into that gray underpainting that we already put on, because it just makes this really beautiful gray. And this is going to look really nice. This dark color, these grays are going to look so nice when we add that yellow, because there's going to be this beautiful, beautiful contrast. Okay, so that's building up the horizon line. That's our first layer on building up that horizon line. All right, so I've added on the graphite for the horizon line, and I put some gesso over it. I tend to like to let that dry quite a bit so before I do anything else, so that way it kind of sets. So while it's kind of drying, I just want to take a step back and kind of talk about where we're at right now. If you wanted, in my opinion, you could basically keep going with just this palette. To me, this is an absolutely beautiful palette. You know, you have the grays from the graphite, you got the gray that we created with the cobalt blue and the orange. You could do a lighter gray up top if you wanted. So you could, you know, go in several different directions with this. But you could keep it super simple, keep your palette really, really simple, and just build a beautiful painting with just the graphite and the cobalt blue and the cadmium orange. I mean, I just think that these color combinations are so soft, they're so gorgeous. But nevertheless, I promised you that we were going to focus on yellow today. So we are going to do that, but I just wanted to mention, now that this is here on the palette, how on the canvas, how absolutely pretty these color combinations are. So like I said, you know, you could get to this point and decide, oh, I'm going to keep going with it with this palette, and you'd have a gorgeous painting. But we're going to move on, and we're going to work with some yellows. So we're going to put some yellow up on the top here, and we're going to mix up some different colors, some different values of the yellows. And basically, what I'm going to do, the process that I'm going to work on, is I'm going to start having darker yellows, darker and deeper, richer yellows around the edges. And as we come into the center, I'm going to get brighter and lighter. Okay, so we're going to have kind of a transition of our colors from dark on the edges and then bring it in and be lighter. And to me, when we get closer, when we see what's happening, it's kind of like where the sunshine is. Okay, so let's first mix up some, we're going to mix up some cadmium yellow deep with a little bit of yellow ochre. And we might actually add a little bit of cadmium orange in there. We will see. But let's first just get some cadmium yellow deep here, because this is our deepest yellow. Tiny bit of yellow ochre on there. So that's just gonna kind of tone that down, and like just a spot of orange. add some clear gesso to that. And I'm just actually going to use my brush just to kind of mix that color up. I'm going to add a little bit of water. And then I'm going to lay it on. And like I said, we're going to lay this on and focus on having the deeper, darker yellows on the edges, on the outside. And then we're going to get lighter and brighter as we move towards the center. Okay? So I'm just spreading this on kind of around the edges, kind of basically where we put the underpainting. Now I am going over the graphite, which is fine because we are going to add more layers on that graphite. So that's fine if you go over it. It actually gives you the ability to kind of see like when the graphite is on and you put some color over it, what happens. All right. So now I have kind of like a nice base of this darker yellow around the edges. I'm going to take the color that's on my palette. I'm going to start adding, slowly adding some white to it. And I'm also going to add some cadmium yellow because we're going to get lighter and brighter as we move in. So I'm just going to start laying that in from the center, from the outsides, and pulling it in. I'm going to add a little bit more white and a little bit more cadmium yellow. And we're going to take that right into kind of the center area or where there's a break. I'll take a step back and take a look at it, see where we're at. So yeah, so we can see how we got the darks on the outside. We're pulling it in, we're making it brighter and lighter in the center, which is exactly what we want. So this is, you know, I do still consider this our first layer of yellows. We can add, once that dries, we can add some more. I'm going to take some of this yellow mixture and I'm just going to lightly bring it down below the horizon line. So we're going to pull that nice yellow color right down into the water. So give it the illusion of maybe a reflection up here. And plus pulling that yellow in kind of makes the painting balanced out with colors, makes it a little cohesive. Okay. So at this point, I still have some paint on my palette. And I plan on building this, getting this a little bit lighter and building this a little bit more. So I'm going to actually leave that paint on my palette. Usually I clean my palette before I make any changes, but I'm going to actually leave that paint on my palette because if it stays wet and if it works out, I'm going to still be able to use that throughout the top part of the painting and maybe a little bit down below. So what I want to do now is, now that the center is dry and the bottom part is dry, I want to work a little bit first on the bottom part. And I still have my brush with that gray on it. And I want to kind of add some lighter parts of the gray. So the nice thing about acrylics is all I really have to do is if I just squirt my brush a little bit, just put a dab of white on my palette, run my brush through it, I can bring in some of the lighter grays because I have grays on my palette still. I pulled in some white, and now I can work on lightening this area up. And I'm just dragging my wet brush across the bottom. And one of the things that I want to accomplish is the top part of the painting is basically going to be pretty opaque, yeah. And the bottom part is going to be pretty transparent and light. So the top part, because we are really focusing on the yellows, I'm building up these colors and these values, and I'm building it up, and it's going to be a little bit heavier, and the yellow is really going to dominate this painting. So the bottom part, even though I want to get these grays on here, I do want to keep the bottom part lighter and airier, and you know, just kind of have it be almost like it's a watercolor in a sense, because I want that bottom part to have a contrast in terms of how the paint is applied to the top half. And then that dark, dark, dark horizon line is really going to contrast and break the two apart. So the bottom, I'm going to keep going a little bit with adding a little bit more white. And again, I'm just going to keep it kind of wet and loose. So I just added a little bit more white to the brush that I've been using for the grays. And I'm just going to kind of streak that in. And I'm actually going to let some of the streaks that my brush is creating actually show. So now we're kind of breaking up some of these areas where it's kind of flat color. Again, we're giving it the illusion that this is a light, watery area. Okay? So yeah, so I'm gonna let this dry a little bit, kind of let it sit, and then we can go back in. We can go back into the horizon line, build up another layer here, and then go back into the top, build up another layer there, and then we can kind of see where we're at as how it compares to the bottom. Cool. All right, so we have let this dry a little bit. I wanna kind of build some more layers up on the top part, on this yellow, and I wanted to make sure that this horizon line, this dark area, is definitely dry before we add some more of the graphite. So right now we're going to focus on adding some more white to this top, because I do want a really nice bright spot, and then we'll move on to the horizon. So as I had mentioned before, I still have some paint on my palette, and it's still workable, so which is cool. I'm just going to take some white, and I'm going to add it right into the colors in the mix that I have here on my palette. So I get a really nice light yellow. I'm going to take that, and I'm just going to add it right into the center here. I'm kind of drag it down a little bit beyond the horizon. just going to take a step back and see where that puts me. So I'm liking it, but I'm actually going to go a little bit lighter. So this time what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to take some white. I'm going to take a completely clean brush. Stop following me. Put it into the white. Take a little bit of the yellow. And I'm going to go over that. Because I do want a spot that's pretty close to white. So I'm just adding that in. Dragging it around the horizon. And then with the brush that I have with the yellow still on it, I can just kind of go around and blend it in a bit. Take a step back again, see where I'm at. All right, so that's looking good. I have a nice bright white going on here in the center, or almost in the center. I'm bringing that color down because I want that to kind of live down, that yellowish to kind of live down below that horizon line and be incorporated into the bottom part to keep the balance going throughout the painting. And I just want to kind of soften a little bit this edge here. So I'm just going to make a quick little mixture of the pull in some of the cadmium yellow deep. So I'm just going to put a little bit of that on my palette. So I'm going to get that deeper color, and I'm just going to kind of lay it in. And I don't have to cover it all up. I'm just kind of blending it just a little bit. Because as you remember, we started with the deeper colors on the edges, and we brought it into the center. We made it lighter and brighter as we moved into the center. But now that I got that kind of whole transition going, I just want to kind of soften up some of the areas. All right, so let's take another look back. Oh yeah, that's definitely better. Excellent. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to building up some more of this horizon, this really dark color. So I'm going to add some more graphite onto there, and I'm going to add some more, I'll add some more clear gesso over that. And we're going to kind of build that up, get that darker, maybe change the shapes a little bit. And then once we get there, we're going to take a look at where we're at with the bottom, and then maybe we'll add some more gray. We'll see where we go. All right, so let's add some more graphite here. So I'm going to take my graphite pencil again, and I'm just going to drag it on. I'm just basically drawing or coloring, throwing it on right onto the canvas. Do the same thing on this side, because I want to make another layer here that's darker. So then we'll have the really nice lighter gray, and we're building up that color. So I'm just going to squirt a little bit of clear gesso on my palette. Take the brush that I used before for the graphite, dip it in, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to brush right over where I laid the graphite. And we can really start to see how that second layer really darkens that up. which is really awesome. Do the same thing to the other side. And I want to purposely leave a little separation between the two, just so the eye has a place to go and follow, kind of follow the path. I always like an exit point. I don't know what that says about me, but I always like to know how to exit anything. So I always leave an exit point in my paintings too. But we're going to add this a little bit more, just lightly putting it on. And this just gives it such a great depth because we have some light areas from the first application. And now with the second application, we've just created some really nice dark darks. And this dark against that yellow, it just creates a beautiful contrast. And then we have that really nice gray happening at the bottom. So, I mean, this is just really coming out beautiful. I love the transition, the way that the yellows are transitioning from that deep yellow into that really bright yellow where maybe the sun is starting to come up. And now we have this tree line. That's what I think of it as on the horizon. And it's really in silhouette. It's really dark. So now we're going to kind of let this dry. Take a look at where we're at on the bottom half. And move on. Thanks. All right. So we're in a really good spot. I have let things dry. I'm loving the top. I love the way the bright yellow is coming straight down through that little opening between the tree line or the two dark areas, coming in, flowing into the bottom half, the water half. So when I look at the bottom half, the only thing that I kind of notice is the colors are all too, or the values are all too similar. So I want to kind of break that up a little bit. So I'm going to mix up some of the darker grays. I'm going to put some darker grays on there, add some white, and then lighten some areas up. Okay, so this I'm considering this kind of gray here as my middle tone in a sense. So I want to make it a little bit darker on this side, maybe make it a little lighter on this side, and just kind of break up that gray at the bottom. It all just feels a little bit too flat for me. All right, so I'm going to mix up some dark gray. Again, I'm going to use the cobalt blue and the cadmium orange. So I'm going to put some blue down first and just add a little bit of white. I know that's already a little bit too much on the dark side. I'm going to add some more white. I probably went too white, but that's all right. And I'm going to add some orange to that because I want to start making it gray. And just for a little note, if you're not sure where your value is, you can just take some from your palette knife and compare it to what's on your canvas. And obviously I can see that this is a nice dark color, which is exactly what I'm going for. And I'm just going to kind of lay this darker gray right on over this section here. Let the texture of the canvas kind of pick up where it wants to. Just wipe that on. I'm going to use the brush that had my grays. And I'm just going to lightly brush that. Just kind of soften it up a little bit. I'm going to bring that color across in some areas. I'm actually going to squirt it with my bottle, get it a little wetter. Bring that darker color. And remember, we're kind of going for the illusion of water. So dragging your brush from side to side kind of helps you get that illusion going. Just a nice light touch. Get that dark color flowing through here, just to break up that overall gray. Just going to kind of scrape into here. Add some wet stuff. Just trying to soften this up just a tad. All right, I'm going to take a step back, see where we're at with this. All right, I am going to take this gray, add a little bit of white to it. And again, just kind of bring it in, bring it across, just to get some variations in that color down below here. And I noticed how, for me, I covered up a little bit of the dark area here, a little bit too much, but that's okay. I can take my graphite, and even though it's wet, I can kind of color over this area, put a speck of gesso on my canvas, take the brush that I was working with for the graphite, and then I can just kind of drag that graphite right into that gray color, just so it's kind of sitting on top of the gray. And then we kind of have a nice little area that it's all incorporated now, the graphite and that new gray that I created. All right. The other thing that I want to do is I just want to add some hints of very defined beads of gray or lines of gray going across. So what I'm going to do is the gray that's on my palette, I have a nice light gray that's on my palette. I'm going to create like this pretty little bead of paint on the edge of my palette knife. And I'm just going to pick certain areas to just kind of drag it across. And do it on both sides. And it just gives the illusion that there is an edge to this water line. So it kind of gives this nice little illusion that there's an edge to the pond. So if we think about this as a tree line, that there is some sort of edge there. And again, it's just using paint to create that illusion of something exists on that horizon line. Okay, so some of the final things I think we need to do, let's first take a step back and kind of take a look at this. I think it's absolutely looking beautiful. I'm so drawn to this really bright yellow spot in the center here where it contrasts with the tree mass here. It just captures my eye, and it's just such a beautiful scene. It's very enlightening and spiritual. It just has that whole overall feeling of the sun is coming up and the angels are singing. But in any case, I just want to kind of take a step back, take a look at where we're at. Again, I think that it really looks beautiful. The grays with the yellows have a nice balance. The only thing that I'm going to do, I think, for one final touch is I still have some of this light gray on my palette. I'm just going to take some of that paint. I'm putting this nice flat layer of that light gray on the bottom of my palette knife, and I'm just going to lightly sweep it over the darker gray. I really like this darker gray area, but I'm just adding like a touch of almost this light gray sitting on top of it is almost like where the sun is possibly catching ripples of water. It's just going to sit right on top of that. And I'm going to do that over on the other side. Let it just kind of grab it. Let it just fall on. Let me take a step back, take a look, see where we're at. I think I'm going to balance out one little corner over here with this gray, the same gray that I'm working with. I'm just going to take, again, I'm taking some of that gray paint, put it on the bottom of my palette knife, and I'm going to lay it on. Now, this is just my own personal preference. This is the way I'm looking at this painting, and I'm making the judgment call of what do I think it needs for some final touches, just to kind of bring it all together, solidify it. And I'm just seeing that I just want this whole area up here just to have a touch of lightness about it. I don't know why. It's just something that's calling out to me. So I'm just going to lay on some of that light gray. Take a step back again. We'll take a look at it. Yeah, see that? For whatever reason, that makes a big difference to me. I'm happier, much happier with that area now. All right, so taking a step back, kind of taking a look at where we're at, and just some final touches. So there's a color that I love to work with. I use Liquitex. It's a brilliant blue. So it's a really earthy blue. I think some manufacturers or some brands call it kind of like a cerulean blue. So this color is something, it's kind of like similar to cadmium orange, where it's a type of color that I love to use right on top of the painting, just a dab of it, just to kind of put some surprise little color. And I think this painting, because it's got all these nice warm tones and the grays, I think this painting is a perfect candidate for me to throw a little bit on here, and plus just to kind of introduce you to this brilliant blue. Like I said, cerulean blue, I think, is what some manufacturers call it. This Liquitex is called brilliant blue. So I am just going to very lightly, I'm going to take it right out of the tube. I'm just going to put like a dab on the corner here. And then I'm going to put a dab right along this tree line. And again, it works nicely with the yellows. It's a nice color to just kind of sit on top of everything else. It's also a really pretty color to add white to. You can make some really gorgeous blues with it. So that's basically it. That's the final touches I'm going to put on here. And like I said, this brilliant blue is one of those things similar to cadmium orange that is a nice color just to use as that little tiny bit of surprise of a color. It just sits on top of everything. It's warm and it's earthy, so it works really well with these yellows, these nice yellows on the top. Actually, I think I'm going to add, just see as I talk more and I look at it more, I just want to add more because I love this color so much. But a little bit goes a long way. So it's one of those colors that a little bit goes a long way. So I think that's it. I think that we've accomplished a really great painting here. We worked on yellows. We kind of highlighted yellows in this painting. We brought several different values of the yellows, kind of focused on making this top part all about bringing in the dark yellows into that bright, nice light yellow. Kept the bottom part more on the gray side, even though again we pulled some yellows down to make the whole piece cohesive. And then we introduced the graphite pencil and how I use the graphite pencil with clear gesso to make these really, really nice, rich, dark, contrasty colors. We did a couple layers of it so that way we have lighter grays with the dark grays sitting right on top. And overall, I think this is really a beautiful painting. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned some things. Don't forget to sign it and have some fun. Thanks so much. Just a couple of final comments on how I finish my paintings. I do a light spray. Once the painting is dry, I do a light spray. I use this Grumbacher. I'm not even sure if that's how you pronounce it, but let's go with it. And it's just a matte final varnish. So it helps protect the colors. It helps protect it from dust. I just do, like I said, it's just a light spray that I coat the whole painting with. A couple of other things. Because I always use gallery wrapped canvas, I always paint the sides a solid color, which is really nice because this gets the buyer so they don't have to frame it if they don't want to. A lot of my paintings that are hanging around the house are finished off like this. I also wire the back, and I tend to go like about a quarter of the way down from the top. And then I usually sign my name, put my name on the back, the year that I completed the painting, and the title of the painting. And that's it. That's how I finish off my painting. Thanks. Hey everybody. I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today in this painting video. I did my first video back in March of 2016, and it became very apparent how enthusiastic everyone was. I sold that first video to people in Germany, Australia, England, several states in the United States. So I got really excited by your enthusiasm. I got some really great feedback, and that's what really kind of drove me to create several more videos. So thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your feedback, for your patience with me as I figure all this out, and for your willingness to learn. If you want to buy any more of my videos, just check out my website, www.jacquieGouveia.com, and click on the shop button. Thanks again. I'll see you later.